The recent social unrest in China is a symptom of the total collapse of the Chinese economy, according to global economists. In China, social discontent has broken out as a result of frozen deposits totaling roughly $6 billion. To put an end to the demonstration, thousands of police were sent in. Following the protest, tens of thousands of Chinese homeowners refused to make mortgage payments totaling up to $300 billion. Mortgage payments are past due, amounting to 2 trillion yuan or $300 billion. The issue with both the bank freeze and the mortgage boycott is that a domino effect is going to happen. The 2008 recession is being repeated in China, but on a far greater scale, as the Chinese Communist Party urgently seeks to control the escalating unrest. An entire societal uprising is brewing. Significant tensions has been disclosed in internal government meetings, and it appears that it will only get worse. China's social unrest has exposed a wide variety of internal problems, and the consequences will ultimately have an impact on the rest of the globe. Recently, over 400,000 Chinese people had their bank deposits frozen. Depositors were simply refused when they attempted to withdraw cash from an ATM. A vast fraudulent scam that went on for more than a decade led to the bank freeze. Despite repeated attempts by the CCP to control them, protests against the bank freeze have gained widespread attention on Chinese social media sites. Construction on properties covering 300 million square feet has been put on hold. Local governments are at their breaking point. Sales of real estate are down 20%. Starts of new projects are down 30%. Recent mortgage revolts in China may be the worst of all of them. Financial authorities have developed a plan to let citizens halt their mortgage payments since Chinese home buyers are not making their mortgage installments. 5 banks failed, and this would ultimately spread to 20, then 100, and finally, the whole financial system. This is because the Chinese banking system is dependent on fractional reserves, much like the financial infrastructure of practically every other nation. The boycott against mortgages was not expected. Years of poor management and greed resulted in a boycott after years of growing discontent. Chinese residents were eager to buy any available real estate since housing costs continued rising yearly. Similar to how the US recession of 2008 began to develop, the public could not even fathom a drop in property values. Due to rising housing costs, people had to save money for years in order to purchase real estate. Real estate is thought to account for between 70 and 80% of Chinese family assets. Imagine putting money aside for years before you ultimately buy a single house. Chinese society, where younger generations would emphasize buying a property, encouraged this kind of conduct. Such a massive buying spree failed the growing real estate market, which lasted for decades. Property developers viewed this hunger as a chance to grow more quickly. The pre-sale strategy was then utilized in this situation. Buyers would put down a deposit and begin making mortgage payments on unfinished homes under the property pre-sale model. Buyers were paying mortgage on homes that hadn't even been constructed yet. Although anyone with a rational mind would know to avoid doing so, purchasing pre-sale homes made a lot of sense during the housing boom. Prospective homeowners believed that house costs would keep rising. They feared that the price would have significantly escalated by the time the property was done. Home buyers would assume the risk of making a purchase during the pre-sale phase in order to obtain residences at a lesser cost. This is comparable to what occurred to the Chinese housing market and is suggestive of a Ponzi scheme. The pre-sold homes have already been paid for by new homeowners, but the builders lack the funds to complete them. Before the boycott, it was already typical for real estate companies to fall short on delivering properties that had been previously sold. The government has granted residents the right to temporarily stop paying their taxes despite cultural customs and laws. The interest rate on mortgages has also been reduced numerous times in China this year. The government lowered the prime rate for 5-year loans from 4.6% to 4.45% in May 2022. Additionally, the CCP has lifted limits on financing to real estate developers. A similar action would be to increase money printing to combat inflation. When lending limitations are lifted, developers will just lend additional money to pay off earlier debts. With this management style, it's reasonable to conclude that incomplete properties will never reach their completion. Imagine that building on properties all around China were to be halted. If every buyer of unfinished homes made a default, $58 billion in loan would be lost. According to economists, this concern will permeate the real estate market and have an impact on mortgages totaling trillions of dollars. Property developers lack the funds to repay their debts after the Ponzi scheme was revealed. In normal conditions, this could be tolerable, but the Chinese government is now taking a lot of swords at once. The Chinese government was gradually revealed during the Henan bank fraud. The CCP used every deceptive maneuver in an effort to contain societal hysteria. But instead of succeeding, they just made things worse. It is understandable that the protests receive widespread notice on the social media. The administration has promised to compensate residents for losses of up to 50,000 yuan, that's $7,500. Due to a false sense of security, the majority of people put their whole lives savings. However, this raises the issue of how the general public was expected to be made aware that the banks were complicit in fraud, even while some could argue that depositors should have done their own research. How are they supposed to detect a scam when the culprits are literally hiding it? Depositors countrywide are rightfully skeptical of all banks as a result of the bank protests. Nobody wants to invest in the Chinese economy any longer among foreign investors. China's strict COVID target of zero COVID cases is still continuing to take place. After finding 4 asymptomatic COVID cases in Wuhan recently, 1 million residents were locked down for shelter in place. The CCP has gone completely hysterical about their goals. David Sachs, a venture investor, thinks President Xi is the source of this panic. I think that this notion of eliminating COVID completely, of zero COVID, got caught up in the credibility of the CCP and Xi himself. Even Chinese citizens are starting to question their Chinese citizenship. With the economy failing, the real estate market is reaching new lows. In addition to having an excessive number of vacant homes, China's population is also rapidly declining. China's implementation of limits on the maximum number of children that individuals might have been the cause of the population drop. The one-child policy, with restricted Chinese families to having just 1 child each, came into effect in 1979. The 2-child policy was implemented in 2016 because the government discovered that their population would drastically decline. The one-child policy continues to plague people, and as a result, China is likely to experience a significant reduction in its population. China is dealing with multiple serious difficulties right now, but all of them would eventually resolve over the long term if the authorities played its cards correctly. The government is shifting back toward a more socialist framework, which historically has been bad for economic growth, so it doesn't seem like that will be the case. At this moment, there is no way to preserve the Chinese economy. The Chinese economy is about to see one of its biggest collapses ever. In the event that social unrest intensifies, the people may rise up in protest against the CCP. Do you think China will survive this? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments section below. Thank you for watching till the end. Hit the like button and subscribe to keep you updated about the latest news in finance, investment, and innovation. See you soon!